My name is Mark Jensen, and for the past 2 years, I've been the sole caretaker of the Starfall Beach Resort. Once a beacon of luxury, now an abandoned ruin swallowed by salt and sand. Most people would call it a graveyard. I call it a sanctuary. Here, the only sound is the ceaseless roar of the ocean, a constant lullaby. But after midnight, the ocean doesn't just sing, it whispers. And it has rules. 5 of them. Rules about polishing brass plaques, about ignoring a false twilight, about never answering when the ocean whispers your name. Rules I thought were harmless folklore. I was wrong, because something sleeps beneath that sand, something that has waited for over a century, and it has an insatiable hunger for company. I used to be a historian, a quiet life, buried in archives, piecing together forgotten narratives. My specialty was obscure maritime disasters, the ones swallowed by the deep, leaving no trace. It was a fascination, a way to understand the vast, indifferent power of the ocean. Then came the incident. Not a shipwreck, but a different kind of disaster. A publication scandal, a forged document. My name dragged through the mud. My career, my reputation, all sunk without a trace. I was disgraced, ostracized. The academic world, much like the ocean, has its own silent, unforgiving currents. I fled, not just the city, but my old life. I needed a place where the past couldn't reach me, where the silence was so profound it could drown out the whispers of my own failures. That's how I found Starfall Beach Resort. Online, it was listed as caretaker needed, remote location, minimal contact, competitive pay. Minimal contact was exactly what I craved. The resort itself was a testament to faded glory. Built in the late 1800s, it had once been a playground for the wealthy, a grand Victorian edifice perched precariously on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic. Now, it was a skeletal frame of peeling paint and crumbling balconies, its once manicured gardens reclaimed by thorny coastal scrub. The salt air had gnawed at every surface, and the relentless waves had eroded the very cliff face it stood upon. It felt abandoned, forgotten, perfect. The job interview was brief, conducted via a grainy video call with a lawyer from some faceless corporation that owned the property. He didn't care about my past. He just cared that I was willing to live alone in a ruin and follow instructions. He emailed me a contract and a single, cryptic document, the caretaker's manual. It was a scanned, typewritten sheet, faded and water-stained. It listed 5 rules. "These aren't suggestions, Mr. Jensen," the lawyer's voice crackled through my laptop speakers. "They are absolute. The continued existence of this property, and indeed your own well-being, depends upon their strict adherence." I signed the contract. I packed my meager belongings, books, a camera, a worn notebook. I left my old life behind, driving for 2 days until the paved roads gave way to dirt tracks, and then to a winding path that finally opened onto the desolate, beautiful expanse of Starfall Beach. The roar of the ocean was immense, a cleansing sound. I thought I had found my peace. I settled into the resort, a ghost in a ghost town. The main house, despite its decay, had a strange, heavy elegance. My living quarters were in a small, relatively intact annex overlooking the churning sea. The 5 rules tacked to my kitchen corkboard seemed innocuous at first, mere superstitions to occupy a lonely mind. "Here are the rules. as transcribed from the fated caretaker's manual. Rule number 1. Every morning before noon, all brass plaques in the main house must be polished until they gleam. Pay particular attention to the names engraved upon them. Implied purpose. A ritual of remembrance or appeasement, ensuring certain entities remain identified or recognized. Rule number 2. If, at any time between sunset and sunrise, the sky appears a shade of green or violet not natural to twilight, ignore it completely. Do not look directly at the horizon. Implied purpose. A visual lure, a false reality designed to draw the observer into an altered state or location. Rule number 3. Never answer if you hear your name whispered by the ocean. It is not the wind nor the waves, but a hunger seeking acknowledgment. Implied purpose. A direct psychic probe from the entity, seeking a personal connection to draw you in. Rule number 4. The weathered stone circle near the old tide pools must never be disturbed. No sand removed, no offerings placed, no stone moved from its position. Implied purpose. This circle is a binding point, a containment mechanism for something ancient. Rule number 5. After midnight, under no circumstances should you consume seafood harvested from Starfall Beach. The ocean shares its gifts, but it also shares its essence. Implied purpose. Consuming local marine life after a certain hour risks ingesting the entity's influence, leading to internal transformation. I read them, a faint smile playing on my lips. Quaint, picturesque. Exactly the kind of charming eccentricity one would expect from an old, isolated resort. I figured they were put in place by some superstitious owner decades ago, perhaps to deter vandals or simply to give the caretakers something to do. The silence here was already healing the raw wounds of my past. My days settled into a quiet rhythm of maintenance and solitude, repairing broken windows, clearing debris, battling the relentless salt spray. The work was therapeutic, physical, demanding. My failures in the academic world faded into the background, replaced by the tangible satisfaction of restoring order to a decaying place. Rule number 1. Every morning before noon, all brass plaques in the main house must be polished until they gleam. Pay particular attention to the names engraved upon them. The plaques were everywhere in the main house, on door frames above fireplaces, marking the grand staircase. Names of past owners, architects, even some of the more illustrious guests from the resort's heyday. I'd polish them every morning, a mindless, meditative task. But as I polished, I started to notice things. The names engraved seemed to shimmer sometimes in the corner of my eye, like they were changing. One morning, while polishing a large plaque in the grand ballroom dedicated to the resort's founder, Elias Thorne, MD-CCCC, I paused. As the brass gleamed under my cloth, the year MD-CCCC 1892 seemed to warp, briefly displaying MM+T at 2022. I blinked, it snapped back. My mind playing tricks, I thought. Lack of sleep, the isolation. But the next day, a different plaque, dedicated to a Matilda Vance, patroness of the arts, seemed to have a faint, almost invisible etching beneath her name. Missing, 1918. I rubbed harder, but the etching remained. It wasn't just a record of history, it was a record of disappearance. The names weren't just names, they were memorials, and the polishing, rather than honoring them, seemed to illuminate their forgotten fates. A subtle shift in my perception, a faint chill. The first profound breach of the rules didn't come from me. It came from an unexpected source. A month into my tenure, a sleek, black SUV pulled up the winding dirt path. Out stepped a woman, mid-30s, dressed in expensive hiking gear, her eyes bright with a hungry intensity. Sarah Coleman, an urban explorer, a social media influencer specializing in undiscovered ruins and forgotten histories. She had somehow tracked the abandoned resort online. "This place is a gold mine, Mark," she exclaimed, her voice jarringly loud in the desolate quiet. "The legends about this coast, incredible." She was everything I wasn't, loud, ambitious, and utterly disconnected from the subtle malevolence of the place. She saw only content, only opportunity. I warned her about the rules, showing her the laminated card. She laughed. "Oh, darling, every creepy old place has its rules. Just adds to the mystique, doesn't it?" Sarah set up camp in one of the crumbling guest cottages, her drone buzzing, her cameras flashing. She was a whirlwind of energy, determined to capture the resort's decay. I retreated to my annex, watching her movements with a growing sense of dread. Rule number 2. If at any time between sunset and sunrise the sky appears a shade of green or violet not natural to twilight, ignore it completely. Do not look directly at the horizon. That night, it happened. Around 10 p.m., long after the sun had dipped below the horizon, the sky began to glow, not with the warm, fading hues of dusk, but with an unnatural, pulsating green streaked with veins of deep violet. It was mesmerizing, terrifying. My eyes were drawn to it, an instinctual pull to witness the impossible. I clenched my jaw, forcing my gaze to the sand, to the waves crashing against the shore, anything but the horizon. I heard Sarah's excited shouts from her cottage, saw her camera flashing wildly as she captured the phenomenon. She wasn't ignoring it. She was embracing it. The false twilight lasted for nearly an hour, washing the entire resort in an alien glow. When it finally faded, leaving the sky a normal, inky black, I felt a profound sense of disorientation. The boundaries of the world felt softer. The next morning, Sarah showed me her footage. "Look at this, Mark," she exclaimed, showing me her tablet. "The aurora borealis over the Atlantic, unheard of. This is going viral." But the footage was warped, the colors shifting unnaturally, and the horizon in her video seemed to stretch almost infinitely into a swirling vortex of green and violet. And in one frame, for a fleeting second, I saw a shape, a massive, indistinct form rising from the ocean depths, illuminated by the impossible light, its scales shimmering with the same greens and violets. A leviathan! I blinked. It was gone. Just Sarah's excited face, oblivious. The strange phenomena continued. And so did Sarah's relentless pursuit of content. Rule number 3. Never answer if you hear your name whispered by the ocean. It is not the wind, nor the waves, but a hunger-seeking acknowledgment. One particularly windy night, the roar of the ocean was immense, a deafening cacophony. I was inside my annex trying to read, but above the roar, faint, almost imperceptible, I heard it. Mark. It was my name, clear as day, as if spoken right next to my ear, yet overlaid with the vast, ancient sound of the sea. It was a soft, seductive murmur, a voice that carried the weight of millennia. It was compelling. It resonated with a deep, hidden loneliness within me, a longing for connection, a yearning to be acknowledged. Every fiber of my being wanted to answer, to call out into the darkness, to confess my name. I closed my eyes, clenching my fists until my knuckles turned white. It is not the wind nor the waves, but a hunger-seeking acknowledgment. I pressed my hands to my ears, trying to block out the siren call. I repeated the names from the plaques, the ones I'd polished every morning, a litany of the missing, trying to ground myself in their silence. Elias Thorne, Matilda Vance. Their names were my shield. The whisper faded, leaving me trembling, drenched in a cold sweat. Sarah, however, had no such compunctions. She saw the resort's eerie nature not as a warning, but as a challenge, an opportunity for a viral video that would make her famous. She discovered the tide pools, a natural rock formation at the base of the cliff, a place where the water collected in shallow basins at low tide. And there, near the oldest, deepest pool, was the weathered stone circle. Rule number 4, the weathered stone circle near the old tide pools must never be disturbed. No sand removed, no offerings placed, no stone moved from its position. The circle was ancient, clearly man-made, but the stones themselves were dark, almost black, and felt strangely cold to the touch. They were covered in symbols, eroded by centuries of salt and wind, but faintly recognizable as ancient runes, similar to some I had studied in my previous life. I warned Sarah about it, told her it was a sacred site, maybe even a burial ground. "Sacred site? Mark, this is incredible!" she exclaimed, her camera already out. "Imagine the clicks, ancient coastal cults. This is better than any aurora borealis." She ignored my pleas. She saw the circle not as a barrier, but as a prop. She started to stage a reveal for her video, carefully removing some of the sand from around one of the central stones to make it more visible, more dramatic. The moment the sand shifted, a low, resonant thrum vibrated through the ground. The ocean, usually a constant roar, seemed to hold its breath for a moment, then crashed against the shore with a sound like a giant sigh. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and decaying seaweed. A cold, damp wind swept through the tide pools, raising goosebumps on my arms. Sarah, oblivious, continued her work. "Just a little more. I need to get the whole inscription," she muttered, pushing aside another stone. The earth groaned. A crack appeared in the stone where she had been digging, a thin, black line that snaked outwards, splitting the ancient rock. From within the crack, a faint, luminescent green light pulsed as if something was breathing beneath the earth. A low, guttural growl, impossibly deep, rumbled from the depths. It wasn't the ocean. It was something else, something vast, something ancient, something stirring. Sarah finally looked up, her eyes wide with a sudden dawning terror. She wasn't seeing content anymore. She was seeing consequence. She dropped her camera, backing away slowly, her face pale. The light from the crack grew brighter, pulsing rhythmically like a gigantic alien heart beating beneath the sand. The tide pools began to churn, the water swirling with impossible currents, dragging at the sand, revealing more and more of the crack, more of the light. The thing beneath the sand was waking up. Sarah's reckless breach of Rule 4 had fractured its prison. The resort began to tremble. Old timbers groaned, glass shattered in distant windows, and the ground itself seemed to undulate beneath my feet. Rule number 5. After midnight, under no circumstances should you consume seafood harvested from Starfall Beach. The ocean shares its gifts, but it also shares its essence. I remembered the last rule. It clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about food, it was about incorporation. The entity beneath the sand wasn't just physical, it was ethereal, a consciousness woven into the very fabric of the ocean, into the life it sustained. Consuming its gifts after midnight, when the veil was thinnest, meant consuming its influence, becoming part of it. Sarah, now in full panic, stumbled back, trying to escape the growing light and the guttural roar that now emanated from the cracked stone. "What is that, Mark?" she shrieked. "What did I do?" "You woke it up," I said, my voice cold, resigned. "It's been sleeping for centuries. The stone circle was its prison." The green light intensified, reaching out like grasping tendrils. The sand around the stone circle began to liquefy, bubbling and churning, revealing more of the vast, glowing fissure beneath. A soundless scream ripped through the air, vibrating in my teeth. It was the entity, fully awake, and it was hungry. Sarah turned to run, but her foot sank into the liquefying sand. She struggled, screaming as the sand pulled at her, dragging her down towards a glowing fissure. "Mark, help me!" I stood frozen, watching her terror. My historian's mind, always seeking to understand, was piecing together the true history of Starfall. The resort wasn't just built on a beautiful beach, it was built on a tomb, a prison. The plaques, the names, the missing, etched beneath them. They weren't just past guests. They were offerings, sacrifices, the caretakers, the rules, the constant polishing. It was all a ritual of appeasement, a way to keep the lid on. I could try to save her. I could pull her out. But what then? The entity was awake. It needed to feed, and if not her, then me. But then I remembered the marble, the one Chloe had dropped, the one the crossing tried to lure me with, the burden I refused to pick up. This place was different. The entity here wasn't playing games. It was a primal, ancient hunger. I saw the desperate fear in Sarah's eyes, her ambition, her recklessness, all burned away by the raw terror of being consumed. She was just another lost soul, caught in currents she didn't understand. And I, who had once studied the lost, found myself facing an impossible choice. The green light pulsed brighter. The ground beneath the stone circle buckled again. The roar from the fissure grew louder, becoming 1,000 voices, a choir of primal hunger. It was the ocean speaking, and it was calling a new name, not mine. "Sarah!" Her eyes widened in terror, then rolled back in her head. Her body went limp, sinking into the liquefying sand. The green light pulsed one last time, engulfing her completely. The sand swirled, closing over the fissure, leaving only a faint emerald glow beneath the surface. The ground settled. The roar subsided, replaced by the familiar, ceaseless crash of the waves. The ocean was silent, sated. I stood there, trembling, watching the tide pools settle back into their peaceful rhythm. Sarah Coleman was gone. No trace. Her camera, her drone, her expensive hiking gear, all swallowed by the insatiable hunger beneath the sand. The stone circle was intact, save for the single crack that still pulsed with a faint green light. My hands were shaking, my heart hammering like a trapped bird. But in the pit of my stomach, a cold, hard resolve began to form. I was no longer just the caretaker. I was the custodian, the keeper. I went back to my annex. I gathered every tool I owned, concrete, sealant, more brass polish. My purpose was clear. The entity needed to sleep, and it was my job to make sure it stayed that way. I spent the rest of the night and the entire next day working. I repaired the crack in the stone circle, mixing concrete with seawater, embedding fragments of ancient runes I remembered from my history texts into the repair. I polished the stone until it gleamed, a barrier against the light. Then I found every remaining brass plaque in the main house, removed them, and buried them deep around the stone circle, cementing them into the ground. Each name, each forgotten memory, a new layer of warding, a new offering. I then went through the entire resort, boarding up every window, reinforcing every door, sealing every crack. I cut off the water and electricity mains. The resort wasn't abandoned anymore. It was a tomb, a sealed vault. When I was done, I stood on the cliff overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, casting long golden shadows across the beach. The ocean roared, a constant, indifferent sound. No whispers, no false twilight. For now, Sarah Coleman was reported missing. The police came, asked questions. I told them she was an urban explorer, that she had wandered off, probably fell into a ravine. They searched for a few days, then left. Another lost soul, swallowed by the wild, unforgiving coast. My story, simple and plausible, satisfied their narrative. They never looked twice at the sealed resort. They never felt the hum beneath the sand. I am still the caretaker of Starfall Beach Resort. But my job has changed. I no longer just maintain its decay. I actively maintain its silence. Every morning I walk the entire perimeter, checking the seals, looking for any new cracks, any sign of disturbance. I spend hours on the beach, collecting smooth, dark stones, polishing them until they gleam, then adding them to the growing barrier around the ancient stone circle. It's a never-ending ritual. I no longer feel lonely. The resort is my companion. The ocean is my constant, watchful adversary. And the entity beneath the sand, it is my ultimate charge, my purpose, my penance. I never look at the horizon. I never answer when the ocean whispers. And I certainly never consume anything from the sea after midnight. I forage for berries in the scrub, keep a small garden in a hidden cove, and purify every drop of rainwater I collect. I live a life of extreme self-discipline, a stark contrast to my previous complacent existence. Sometimes, late at night, I hear it, a faint humming from beneath the sand, a gentle tremor that vibrates through the ground, and then a whisper. Mark. It tries to lure me. It tries to break me. But I am stronger now. My past, my failures, they are gone. Replaced by this new, terrifying responsibility, I came here to escape my history. I found a new, eternal one. I am no longer just Mark Jensen, the disgraced historian. I am Mark Jensen, the keeper of the ocean's hunger, and my purpose is clear. I will keep it sleeping for as long as I can. My life is a constant, quiet battle. The entity beneath the sand doesn't just sleep, it dreams, and its dreams manifest in subtle ways. The false twilights appear more frequently, testing my resolve. The ocean's whispers become more seductive, sometimes echoing names from my past, promising solace, offering release from my endless vigilance. But I resist. Each successful resistance strengthens my purpose, solidifies my role as the keeper. I often wonder about Sarah. Was her consumption a necessity, or could I have saved her? The memory haunts me, a heavy counterpoint to the endless roar of the waves, but her sacrifice, unwitting as it was, bought me time. It showed me the true nature of the hunger, the delicate balance of the rules. She was a spark that ignited the ancient, and I became the one to put it back to sleep. The corporation that owns the resort occasionally sends terse emails, inquiries about property status and future development. I send back brief, non-committal updates about ongoing structural issues and severe coastal erosion, ensuring they understand that Starfall Beach is utterly unsuitable for any human presence. They believe me. They don't want to invest more in a money pit. They don't know they're funding a prison. I found an old weathered journal in a hidden compartment within the annex wall. It belonged to Elias Thorne, the resort's founder, the name on the first plaque I polished. His entries, spanning decades, detailed his own struggles with the deep hunger, his efforts to contain it. He, too, was a keeper, a line of guardians stretching back to the original construction. I am just the latest link in a chain, inheriting a responsibility I never sought. But unlike him, I will not let it escape. I learned to live with the isolation, with the constant vigilance. The sand, the sea, the wind, they are my world. And in this desolate beauty, I found a strange kind of peace, a purpose that transcends my ruined past. I am bound to this beach, to these rules, but I am also free, free from the expectations of society, free from the whispers of my own failures. I am the keeper, and the ocean, in its vast and different power, is my only witness. If you seek solace in isolation or a retreat from a world that has scorned you, pay close attention to the rules of your sanctuary. Because some places offer more than just peace. They offer a new purpose, forged in ancient terrors. And sometimes, the ultimate escape is to become the final guard. But desolate beaches aren't the only places with strange rules that guard terrifying truths. Sometimes, the most dangerous instructions come from the very reflection staring back at you. Imagine a luxury beauty and aesthetics clinic that promises eternally youthful results, but has a night shift for special maintenance. Never look in the mirror after midnight at the clinic. Your reflection will not be yours, because the pursuit of beauty can lead to an unspeakable transformation, one where your very image becomes a trap. Subscribe to Midnight Rules and hit that notification bell for more bone-chilling tales of twisted rules that could save your life or cost you everything you hold dear. Next week, we confront the terrifying truth of vanity with the Eternal Beauty Clinic, Rules for the Perfect Reflection.